Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back. So today we have with us, I'm assuming, a very fun guest because the way she described herself was like a purple-haired chick from the Bronx or something like that. But it's Melanie Cohen, and I love having her here. She's a weight loss and clutter coach, which I'm excited for her to tell you about. But welcome, Melanie.
Thank you for having me, Tammy.
Yeah, so tell us a bit. I know you said you've been on a 30-year journey, and I know you've had a history because I'm just reading over the blips of the little things you put in there, but I kind of
Sure.
giggled at the one where your father was a physicist and drug dealer. So I was like, yeah, if you're making them, you might as well sell them, but we'll get more into that too. But tell us a little bit about how you got doing what you're doing or why you're here in the space today.
So much to unpack for you. But I actually started my life in the Bronx. I live in Brooklyn now, but I started in the Bronx, where I lived with my parents when my father was finishing his PhD in chemical engineering and applied physics. My mother was working in a science library, and I was just doing my thing. And when my father got his PhD, and got like his first big like job in chemical engineering for a company we once knew as Carbide. It's not around anymore. And my dad was just the guy who always wanted to take care of everybody. In Hebrew or Yiddish, we would say the macher. Like he wanted to be the head of the family, like, money for everybody, special things for everybody. And that didn't happen on the salary that he got as an engineer. And so he dabbled in drugs on the side, and that allowed him to feel like the big guy, if you will, in addition to extra funds for the things that I got to do living in New York. I went to private school, I went to sleepaway camp, I was a competitive gymnast. I didn't ask for a lot, but what I asked for, I usually got. And that was all, supported by the fact that my father had this side hustle of selling drugs. And as a competitive gymnast, a high level, like training 4 or 5 hours a day, 5, 6 days a week. A lot of toxic scrutiny over the scale, body shaming, the whole nine, everything that you've heard about coaches in gymnastics being inappropriate with kids is true. I lived it, I breathed it. And when I quit gymnastics, I gained weight, and I gained weight like fast and furious. Both I was depressed and I was eating to manage my feelings, much how my father managed feelings with drugs, and just didn't know what else to do with myself. And I gained weight in college. I gained weight after getting married, after having my kids. And I hit 30, and it was like I didn't know who I was anymore. First of all, I was 30 and 200 pounds. And I mentioned I was a gymnast, so I'm not a super tall person. So 200 is like a lot of weight. And I just said, I don't want to be that mom. I don't want to be that wife. I don't want to be that manager. I worked in the fashion industry. I didn't want to be around the models because they made me feel less than.
Mhm.
And that's when I joined a weight loss plan, lost over 60 pounds, and very quickly left my job for a lingerie manufacturer to work as a weight loss coach for over 20 years. And as you mentioned before, I introduced a couple of years ago the concept of removing the physical and mental clutter to help people gain health, wellness, and in many cases losing weight.
I love it. I love the just the fact that the mental, when you think of clutter, you don't think of the mental clutter. And that is
Right.
so important. And you say that when I say that all the time, like my brain looks like my junk drawer. Like sometimes I'm just like I got so much stuff in there and you can only process so much before you forget where things are?
Exactly. So I have so many things to say just about that. I posted a video on social media today about the junk drawer. So like the timing was perfect that you mentioned that. And it was just a follow up. Last year I cleaned out the junk drawer, and this year it was like still not a junk drawer. It was like, organized and ready to roll. But yeah, I think for the person who has the neatest, cleanest home where everything has a place, you can eat off the floor. There's still some kind of clutter in all of our lives, and for most of us, it's between the ears, and that's I think is also where the most insidious clutter is, and that clutter can contribute to the physical clutter, and the physical clutter contributes to the mental clutter, and then we get like caught in this gerbil wheel or whatever. And both of my parents have clutter issues. I don't mean clutter issues like, there's a pile of papers here, like significant clutter problems. And I know where they come from, and I want to credit both of them with understanding that most clutter at high level, like quarter level, comes from trauma. And both of my parents experienced, really interesting trauma in their lives. And I'm conscious of the fact that when I'm in their homes, I am very uncomfortable, very overwhelmed. And it's a lot of what taught me about the need for me to remove the clutter in my own life. And, I think you only have listeners. Does video go on your
It
podcast,
does.
Mary?
If you want it to, it
Okay,
will go on YouTube
great.
as well.
Well, the only thing I'm saying is like there's like a whole bunch of pictures on my wall, and you can see there are books on the shelf. I believe in things. I love things. I love colors and textures and prints and colorful. I have purple hair and tattoos. I believe in like colorful things, and I believe that things have energy. And if things have good energy, you want to keep them around you. Those are the things you want to hold on to. And the things that don't have positive energy, let it go,
Let it
because
go.
those are the things that are going to weigh you down.
Absolutely. I just did another podcast interview today, and it was funny because she was talking about how she looks at we're all energetic beings, and you're only doing one of two
Okay.
things with your energy. You either have an energetic surplus and you're giving to the world, or you have a negative energy surplus, like you have a negative balance in your energy, which means you're sucking from the world, and you have to decide. And it was funny that she said that. It's,
Yeah.
the whole day
And
is
and
kind of
that
murphy.
and that energy suck, like the people who are sucking your energy have so much more power over us than the ones that are giving the positive energy. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you said you gained weight really quickly. Did you ever
Mhm.
become like, anorexic, bulimic? Like, did you ever do any of that to control the ups and downs or?
So the true story is that while I was being called fatty, piggy, chubby, like all the wonderful things that a coach said to a young teenage girl to inspire her, and many of my other teammates, in fact. And like we had to weigh in every Monday. If you made your weigh in, you didn't have to weigh in again during the week. But if you were up, you had to weigh in every day. And we're talking about kids who like had a very low body fat percentage. We were all in great shape, but I think for most of us in that category, weren't built like ballerinas. We were built like powerhouses. Like that's acceptable now. Simone Biles would have been called fat by my coach, 100%,
100.
with abs 100%. And how scary is it when you look at like how compact and tight and strong her body is. Anyway, we had to turn in food diaries, and one day my coach, I'm telling you the honest truth when I say I will never forget the girl's name. If she's listening, probably not. I don't think I've seen her in 40 years. But he said, um, if you need to, I will send you to the bathroom with Patty Pecoraro, and she will teach you how to throw up. The adult that I spent the most time with, other than my own parents, was the one that said, you know, the answer to everything is bulimia. It boggles me. So yes, there were some problems with eating disorders in high school, and I think the weight gain came when I was like, that's it. I'm not going to binge and purge anymore. It didn't necessarily stop the binging, or just unhealthy eating. And yeah, I mean, it speaks volumes to the impact that the adults in your life when you're growing up have on you.
Oh yeah, I can remember my mom she was anorexic at 16, and my dad said she was like 68 pounds with a feeding tube in the hospital. So I was a 5 foot 91 pound gymnast, and every day of my life she was like, "You're fat. Do you really need to eat that cookie? You really need to eat that." And I remember to the
Right.
point where my father thought I had an eating disorder. My mother thought I was fat, and they took me and into New York City. I remember, and I had to be in this like tank where they weighed you, and they get the official body fat percentage. And I don't remember what it was, but it was like maybe 5 or 6%. I was a tiny little gymnast, And I remember them saying, I want you to keep a food diary because we don't think you're eating enough. I was eating like 2,500, 3,000 calories a day and not gaining. And then there's my mother, you're fat, you're fat. I'm like, oh God, I couldn't win. But it's
Wow.
crazy. And I know, like, as someone who grew up with like the alcoholism, the addiction, and everything like that, I didn't have eating. I got lucky. That was one of those things that just was not my comfort of choice, I guess you could say.
Sure.
My dopamine hit of choice was not food.
Right.
But like a lot of people, they say it's a control thing. A lot of times when you come from that traumatized, it's something that you can control that nobody really else can, is how much you put in or take out of your
Exactly.
body.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And that's like one of the earliest things for us too, whether it's potty training or eating. But like those were the two things that we had a choice for when we were young. And what's interesting for me is that my father being an addict, crack, cocaine is what did him in at the end. He's now clean, um, nearly 35 years, so a big deal. But his father was a gambler before him. And what I know for me is I'm like afraid of gambling because I saw what can happen. My grandfather lost large amounts of money, disappeared for days at a time. And probably I'm also very afraid of drugs because I've seen what can happen. My father lost his business, his home, his wife. I was estranged from both of my parents for a period of time. And so I think like for me, using food to cope was easy. Well, it is easy. But it also didn't look to me like it was dangerous the way gambling or drugs were. And in the end, dangerous,
Yes.
getting
Hmm.
to an unhealthy weight and all the things that could happen had 25 years ago, I had not made the choice to change my life.
Well, and you look at it too in this world, and I don't mean to be, I don't want to say anything about everybody, but people in the United States aren't thin. They're not healthy, the majority of them. So,
Yep.
people, if you're walking around with a bottle of bourbon in your purse, people are going to talk some smack about you, but they're not if you're eating that second sleeve of cookies. They're not going to say anything if you're only 200. I mean, I know 200 probably sounded huge to you, but I'm size 6 or 8, and I'm like still, I don't know, I'm below average in size. The average pant size is a 14 in this country.
Yeah. I don't know if people don't say anything though, or maybe they're not saying any things openly, but like the amount of side eye I got before I lost my weight, like getting on I live in New York City, like getting on the subway and going and to sit down and there's only one seat, but you don't fit in one seat. And people are aggravated that you're in their space. And I definitely felt like sitting in a theater seat and you're hanging over the side. Like, I don't, I, people are rude
Yeah,
without, it all it takes is a look. It feels like the mom look too. Like
right.
you were going to get in trouble if you saw the mom look, and people were judging you if you got that kind of side eye for being, for taking up too much, taking up more space than you paid for or something.
And yeah, I guess I've never really gotten that side eye, but I don't look, I see people that are clearly overweight. I don't, and I maybe that's just, I don't judge them either. Maybe that's it. But
Right.
I am curiously empathetic towards someone if I see them clearly drunk out in public. I'm like, oh, what are the, like I
Hmm.
question that and I
Right.
wonder about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there are people who are more empathetic than others at the end of the day.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So you do the coaching now, the cluttering and decluttering, I guess you could say. Um,
Yeah.
do you think so you never had substance abuse problems? Your dopamine hit was the food was food. So
The dopamine hit was food. And then I started my weight loss journey where I went from a size 20 to a size 8. And I had to replace my clothing. I needed it like practically. I needed it for work and I needed it for play. And my size went down multiple times. And I think in the end, I discovered, well, yes, you needed to replace your whole wardrobe down to my shoes. My feet went down a half a size. I do think that my shopping at that time had become compulsive.
Yeah.
And that there was the dopamine hit. And one of the things that I talk with my clients about all the time is that if clutter comes in many forms, financial clutter is one of them.
Yeah.
And the compulsive shopping is one of those things that can lead to financial clutter.
Yes. And, just from experience from pretty much anybody I know that has stopped drinking or stopped gambling, it's until you actually deal with the root cause and deal with the actual issues that are making you need
Right.
that hit, you're just going to move from one to the next. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
anybody in my family that I know that is not currently actively drinking or doing drugs or gambling is anybody I know that is in recovery, they've just moved from one to another. So, like, my sister doesn't drink anymore, but she has troubles with food. She binge eats, so I was one of those. I stopped drinking. I was a workaholic. It's just, and took over. My grandmother never took a drop in her life, but single divorced mom back from in the 1920s, she was a
Mm,
gambler. So it's just you're going to do something to fill that void.
yes. Yes. Um, you know, if only we had been given the tools to
Yes.
have the right behavior to lean into instead of all of these other ones
Yep.
that just get us in trouble. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. If somebody ever, said to me, Tammy, every time you think about doing something that's probably not good for you, just replace it with something positive. Like even just something that simple would have been like, oh, that's a great idea. Why didn't I
Yeah.
think of that? You know, it's just, it's amazing. But
Yeah.
yes. So your father was the addict. Your mother was not. She was,
Um, I know she used, but I'm pretty sure she flat out stopped when my dad deserted her. Um, and so there are times I wonder if she was using drugs because, at one point, my father's business was failing and they were running out of money, and I was in college, at a private college that they said that they would pay for. And I think and so my father was selling things for drugs. So he was selling, jewelry and family items, family heirlooms. And I think there was probably a period of time where my mother was doing drugs just so she could be up 24/7 to prevent him
mm,
from stealing or taking items. But that was my image from the outside. So I really, I don't know what was happening there when I was off at college. I have an indication from phone calls and letters and things like that. But for sure, she was the codependent one in the
right.
relationship. Yeah.
Yes. And that's going to happen. So you still talk to your parents? Are you still close to them or not your
I
father, I
did
guess, but
actually, I think my father and I maybe came together more
oh,
as a result of all of this and much later. You like when I got to the point where I was done being angry and bitter and disappointed. Well, maybe I'm still a little disappointed at times, but but like the anger is gone. It doesn't serve me. And so we have a relationship. My mother and I have a relationship. I'm doing everything that I can to help my parents with clutter because I am an only child to divorced parents, and their mess becomes my mess. And so there's verbiage that I like to use in certain situations that help simplify processes or help people, accept your help. And it was when I was given the vocabulary of, so how do you want to leave this for me when you're gone? When you're gone, do you want us to be able to memorialize you and honor you and tell stories and listen to your favorite music and eat your favorite foods? Or do you want us to be buried under a pile of quite literal crap trying to clean it out? Your choice. And they both were pretty responsive to that,
mm,
frankly. It took a long time with both of them, one longer than another, and I'm not going to say who. And I think it's important to say that they did, come around and were cleaning at their pace, not my pace. It's not up to me. My husband has been incredibly helpful. And it's just it also opened the conversation with my own daughters who are adults and to say, I'm not going to leave it like that for you.
Yes.
Go ahead, smack me when I start collecting things out of control. Get on me when you see like what I consider maximal becoming, explosive. Like stop me dead in my tracks. Know that we had this conversation, and I think they trust me on that.
And it's funny how when you talk about like these generational traumas and this generational stuff, that some
Yes.
things you literally like some kids, their parents drink and they are like, I will never touch the shit. I will never, you like never, never, never. And some
Mhm.
it's just a way of life and they're sad and they're angry and they're hurt and they're
Yeah.
scared and they drink. And same
Yeah.
thing, like, they I love the people that get into the like generational trauma from like a good example is my grandfather grew up during the Depression and they
Mhm.
had many, many, many kids and very little money. So it was a exciting, like if they could get something on sale to be able to buy something. And I mean, I can remember him like turkey after Thanksgiving would be on sale for like 9 cents a pound, and he would buy like 50 turkeys. You know what I mean? And it was so now I'm like literally, and my father had like these, he was completely OCD. So he had this organization process of with his clutter. Now he had a lot of clutter, but it was in a box labeled. So you could look at a box and it would say 1 through 100 items and it would be like ashtray, this, that. And I'm like so organized, but still clutter. And then he had SAP boxes, which were called his store away permanently boxes. And I remember saying the same thing. I was like, Dad, when you die, like, I don't mean to be rude, but can I just
But
throw them all out without even opening them? He said, Yeah, I guess so. And that's what we did. We threw away his SAP boxes. But I'm one of those people. I remember I saw a tip one time from a lady that said, every time you bring something into the house, throw out 10 things and you will quickly declutter your house.
right.
But you know what I found myself doing? And this is how the human brain is so crazy. I wouldn't buy a couple extra things at the store because I knew I would have to put it in that fourth bag. And I'd have to throw away 40 things instead of 30. So I was like, screw that. So I was like,
I
the
love
brain
that.
still, but I'm
I
I'm
love
not
that.
I'm a throw out. If I don't need it, if it doesn't touch my heart in some way and I don't think I'm going to use it again, I don't need it. I just get rid of it.
That's
I
great.
I don't have
That's
an
great.
emotional attachment to very many things. So
It's interesting because, well, first of all, 10 things. Wow, that was a very strict tidbit. Because I'm like, get rid of two, one in, two out.
oh, that's easier.
And but to your point, it makes you more thoughtful when you're purchasing something. And I often tell people just because you see something doesn't mean you have to buy it in that moment. Pick a period of time. If you're in love with it, then make yourself wait 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever your number is. Because if in 24 hours you've forgotten about it, you didn't love it. You loved it in the moment. And if you do remember it, maybe you can wait another day. And if at the end of the next day you're still craving to have that thing, go back and get it,
That's a good
and
tip.
which is why the internet has made this so hard for so many of us. And it's in instant, like just hitting like tap, 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 pressing enter, and then all of a sudden it's on our doorstep. Back in the day when we were ordering from catalogs, we had
Mm.
to wait a week or two before something showed up. But now with things like Amazon, we can have it in our hands the next day. And there are some same day things. It really speaks to if we are compulsive in life, that's the kind of thing that can get us in trouble. And the other thing about it, because you were mentioning OCD, is that there are a large number of people who suffer from hoarding disorder who have OCD. There's a tight connection there.
Mm.
And I think it sounds very counterintuitive. People are like, how can you have OCD and have all this clutter? And for most people, unlike your father, what happens is there's so much in our head, we have to do it all at once. So I have to get rid of the clutter. That's it. I have to do it all at once. None of us can do it all at once. And so we say, this weekend, I'm going to clean the house. And Sunday morning rolls around and we still haven't gotten started because we don't know where to start. We think we have to do it all, as opposed to setting some ridiculously simple goal where we say, you know what, I'm going to clean out the junk drawer. We were talking about the junk drawer earlier. Or I'm going to clean out the sock drawer. Like none of it has to be the whole cabinet, just one drawer. It doesn't even have to be a whole drawer. It could be a portion of it. If we allow ourselves the gift and grace of taking time, we can succeed so much better. But if I have OCD on top of this, it's going to be that much harder to come to terms with one baby step at a time.
Yeah. And that's a great tip. Yeah, it was a struggle. I mean, I've never like the OCD to the point of insaneness, like
Mhm.
by buying socks and embroidering one and one, two and two, new Roman numerals on his white socks so that they didn't wear unevenly. And I said to him, Dad, this is a great plan, and except in 20 years, all of your socks are going to freaking have holes on the very same day. And that's exactly what happened. Like all of a sudden, one year he was like, Tammy, all my socks have holes. And I'm like, where am I going to find freaking gold toe white socks? They don't even make them anymore. And he
Right.
needed 20 more pairs. And I'm like, well, you're not going to live through 20 pairs. Like it was like this whole thing. And
Yeah.
he would just kind of like get a little agitated. I'm like, okay, I'll get your socks. It's all good. But I love that tip for the people out there because I think decluttering in general, like you said, your mind, your life, and it's kind of like how it's like they said, is how you do food is how you do everything. And I feel like that could very well apply to clutter.
Yes. 100%. Yes. I didn't even realize how much. And I know, for myself, it is about what level of clutter or level of lack of clutter is a good fit for you. Unfortunately, for those of us who have a spouse or a kid living at home or something, what they are comfortable with, different level than you're comfortable with. And so it's finding that middle ground because I know when there's mess around me, I am less productive. I already have ADD. So I'm already going to be like bright shiny object, squirrel, yada yada yada. But if it's a mess, it's so uncomfortable. And it could be, well, after I clear this pile of papers, and I want you to know I'm not pointing to an actual pile of papers. We're pretending right now
Sure.
that
No, I'm just kidding.
that if I just did that, I'd be able to do everything else. And then I get into one of those little where I've done like a third of this pile, but then I got distracted by that and I did a third of that pile. When in reality, if I removed the clutter from my eyesight, I would feel more centered and more capable of getting
Yeah.
things done.
Wow, I didn't know this whole conversation was going to turn into a clutter thing, but I think there's people out there that need to hear that. I really do. And I've never really I've heard of like an organizational coach. I've never heard someone that was like just flat out, no, I freaking help you get the clutter out of your life and your mind and your brain and everywhere else that it exists because it's there whether you know it or not. And it's like everything else, it's a hindrance.
If I can tell you, so one of my very best friends from going back over 40 years, we met when we were 13. She owns a personal organizing business. She's been in business for over 25 years and high end, works with clients in really what she calls inventory management or move management. And and so I've learned so much from her. She's the first person I went to and I said, I'm having a problem with my parents. I need your help. What should I say? What should I do? And she also helped me in my um, during the period of time where I was doing all the research necessary to write my courses and set up my podcast and all of the things where I get to share, my wealth. A lot of my wealth came from her and learning more about organization. And she most definitely is an organization coach. And for me, I feel this is, and we agree to disagree on this one. I feel like if you're spending a lot of time organizing, you still have too much stuff. And her feeling is, no, it just needs to be organized right in order to be able to manage it. And you know what? Probably somewhere in between is what is true for most people. But I know for me, I am going to end up reorganizing the same thing over and over again if there's too much of it. I have to make sure that I have found the right level for me. My husband may have more socks than I do, but I may have more pairs of underwear. It's which thing is the thing that you want to have. And I think the other thing is I have been shocked in the past, but no longer shocked when people tell me that they have a family member who has a clutter problem and even, high level hoarding. Um, because no one shares that information. Like it's shaming and embarrassing, and you close the door, like everything gets shoved into the closet before company comes, and you pray that that closet door doesn't get opened. I think there are many more, quote unquote, skeletons in those closets than we all take for other people. And it would be helpful if people were more inclined or more comfortable in talking about this, because we could all help each other so much.
Well, yeah, I just did this summit in December and it was called Shattering the Stigmas. And again, that's one of, and it was just all on all these mental health things. And there's all,
Mm,
people are hoarders
yeah.
for a reason. It's not because they wake up one day and they go, you know what, I think I'm going to collect so much stuff I can't sit on my couch or have a place for my children to sleep. They don't do
Exactly.
that. They just,
No.
so if people, yeah, again, it's like everything else. If there wasn't this
Yeah.
shame involved with it, people could come forward and be like, help me, I have a problem. But,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
it's just part of it, and that's what we're here to do, is shatter those stigmas, right? So,
Yeah.
oh wow, this has been fun. I could literally talk to you forever. But first of all, a couple questions for you. Um,
Yes.
tell people, how do they work with you? How do they get hold of you? What do you offer? All of that good stuff.
So I offer one-on-one coaching via Zoom. I also come and do in person if someone wants to do cluttering, but in person. I also have a weekly program. I've written 50 courses on all aspects of mindset. I like to say that I help people lose weight and get healthy by removing the physical and mental clutter in their lives. And it's a mindset first methodology. This is how many calories, points, macros, or whatever you should be eating. This isn't how many minutes or what kind of activity you should be doing, how much sleep, how much water, all those things that we know we need to do to lose weight. This is all about mindset first. So we talk about everything from decision making fatigue and analysis paralysis to emotional eating on a regular basis, a whole lot of different ways to address both the physical and the mental health. I also have a free ebook that I think I sent already to you the link for your listeners to be able to get the book for free. Just a little way to like jumpstart the journey.
Okay. And I will drop everything that you sent me will be in the notes. If you ever have anything you want to
That's
add,
great.
I will put it all in the show notes. And for
Yeah.
the listeners out there, as always, go to the show notes because there's so many golden nuggets in them that you won't remember. You're going to go, oh gosh, you're going to go home and you're going to go, who is that? Was her name? Melissa, Melinda, Melanie? Like, what was her last name? Cohen, Coham? Like, it's not going to happen unless you go to the show
Right.
notes. So definitely check them out. And then, Melanie, this has been awesome. But can you leave the listeners, can you give them two tips, maybe two tricks or something to get them started?
100%. So, one thing, it's little and big all at the same time. I like to do what I call a 30-day decluttering challenge. Um, Commit to 30 days. And on day one, make it really easy. Get rid of one item. We all have one thing we can get rid of. And then on day two, two items, three, up the ante to three items. By the ninth day, you're at nine items. And each day you increase by one. So at the end of the month, if you've made it to day 30, it's over 450 items.
Ooh,
And if you didn't want to do it on the weekends, or if you only wanted to do it on the weekends and just picked the numbers, at the end of the month, you're still getting rid of 100, 200 or more items. And it can make such a huge impact. We can all start with one. So it's that idea of starting ridiculously simple as opposed to starting big and not being able to do it and falling apart and maybe accomplishing nothing. So that's one of my fun ways of doing it. We've done it in my house and we do it on a regular basis now as a way to like freshen up and make sure that we've stayed decluttered. And the other thing that I would say is that it these small steps, these ridiculously small steps, become the building blocks of much more complex goals. But we can't start with the complex. We have to start with the really simple.
Absolutely love it. I mean, it makes so much sense. You can't run before you can walk. Baby steps.
Exactly.
Start small, and it's like everything, and especially everything in healing, when you're trying to change things, it takes a long time to build habits. It takes a long time to make it comfortable, and you don't want to throw yourself, like you said, like the 10 bag, my bringing in 4 grocery bags and thinking I got to throw out 40 things. I was like, oh, like my junk drawers are clean, what do I do? Like my dog, my kids, like like you don't want to get in that situation. So
Right.
yes, that was super, super helpful. Thank you so much, Melanie, for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for all the listeners out there, you heard it. We don't know. Sometimes we don't even know, but that's what this podcast is about. We don't know what we don't know. I'm looking around my room now thinking about my 4 pending stacks. I call them my pending piles. And yeah, they need some decluttering. And it becomes overwhelming. You look at something and you go, oh, I can't deal with that because it's just too much. So start small, start simplifying, and go at your own pace because that's what life is about. It's about healing at your own pace. There is no right and wrong, there is no linear version of this. You might skip a day, you might skip two, you might jump back a week. It doesn't matter as long as you're focused on the big picture, which is going forward and able to live your absolute best life. You are doing what you need to do. Thank you
Yes.
guys so much, and I will see you next week.